Hi guys from Millbank. I'm here with another chapter from Thunderbolt's Waxwork from the book The Adventures of the New Cook Gang by Philip Pullman. Hope you've been enjoying it so far. Let's go on to chapter 6. It Screamed at Me. By this time, the kids in the alley opposite Rummage's were hopping with impatience. Dippy couldn't creep out while people were looking, and the window seemed to act as a magnet for all kinds of passers-by, including dogs. A suspicious-natured cur called Rags, who belonged to Fred Hipkiss the grocer, caught sight of Dippy's face as he stopped to investigate a lamppost. Rags suddenly leaped backwards. All his mangy hair stood on end, and a low growl came from his throat as he stalked up to the window. After his trouble with the hiccups and the wasp, Dippy was feeling rather sleepy and gave a sudden jerk as he nearly nodded off. That roused Rags's fury. Clearly the horrible thing in there was challenging him to a fight. He leapt up at the window time and time again, barking madly, tumbling down each time, only to get up in a frenzy of noise and temper and try again. Benny dealt with that. He ran across, lassoed Rags with Thunderbolt's emergency twine and hauled him away. The next problem was a young man called Ernest and his best girl Ethel. They were strolling along moonily, stopping every so often to look at each other's and sigh. Finally, they drifted to a halt outside Dippy's window and gazed into each other's eyes. The kids tiptoed across and hid in the angle of the bow window nearby. "Oh, Ernest," Ethel sighed. "Oh, Ethel," Ernest mumbled. "Do you love me, Ernest?" "Oh, yes." "How much do you love me?" "Oh, a huge amount. Enormous." "Would you save me from a burning building?" "Not half." "What else would you do for me, Ernest?" Ernest paused. "What?" "Ethel, you see that dummy in the window?" The gang froze. Ethel drew back her head from Ernest's shoulder. "What about it?" she said. "Well, them gloves it's got on. They're just like the ones I told you about, what I saw in Whiteley's." "Is that all? You're more interested in gloves than in me?" "I don't know why I bother with you. You don't love me at all." I do, honest." "Well, what would you do for me?" Ethel, I'd swim the fiercest river in the world." "What else?" I'd run 1,000 miles in me bare feet." "And?" "I'd fight 10 lions with me bare hands." "Oh, Ernest," Ethel said softly. "And when can I see you again?" "Well, I'll come on Tuesday if it isn't raining," he said. "Oh!" And Ethel stamped her foot and flounced away. Ernest followed, protesting. "Helpless," said Angela. "Run 1,000 miles, fight 10 lions? You'll come on Tuesday if it isn't raining, eh?" Zelina scoffed. "Never mind them," said Benny. "What we going to do about Dippy?" "He's paralysed," said Thunderbolt. "It's that horse reviver. It must have turned his blood to ice." "He's not moving at all," said Benny. "Wake up, you old clot." Dippy awoke with a loud snort. He blinked and looked around, and Benny tapped the glass again. Dippy peered forward and finally saw a row of desperate faces through the window. They were all saying something that he couldn't make out. Get to the floor. Give to the poor. Then they started gesturing at him. He thought they'd gone mad. He was about to say so to the man sitting next to him when he had a horrible shock. The man was dead. Some horrible murder had been committed. A deranged taxidermist had stuffed the victim and sat him up in a chair, and he'd be next. With the help of terror, Dippy tried to escape. He uncrossed his legs and stood up, but having been crossed for so long, the left one had gone to sleep, and when Dippy put his weight on it, it gave way. "They've cut me leg off," he gasped, grabbing at the nearest thing, which happened to be one of the other 2 dummies left standing. It fell over him, and the 2 of them landed, locked in an embrace which made Dippy think of The Mummy's Vengeance, a story he'd read only the month before in one of Thunderbolt's penny shockers. Incoherent with terror, he scrambled up, found the little door, wrenched it open, and tumbled through into the darkness of the shop, giving out little squeaks of fear. The darkness was cool and quiet. Dippy still couldn't stand up straight because his leg hadn't woken up. Maybe if he just had a little sip of horse reviver. There was still a little bit left of it in the flask. He swallowed the last mouthful, smacking his lips with satisfaction. Someone behind him was shouting, wasn't it Benny's voice? Swallow some more! Or was it, open the door? Yes, that was it. He had to open the door. Nothing to it, really. He laughed a scornful laugh, thinking of how fearful he'd been. Just get over the counter and he could open the door and go home and have a lie down. Same as that other fellow was doing further along. That other fellow was the duck's back rainwear dummy, which Mr Paget had put there earlier. But to Dippy's fuddled eyes, it looked so comfortable lying there that he thought he'd join it. At the third try, he got onto the polished mahogany counter, knocking off a display rack of silkoline cravats on the way, and stretched himself out peacefully. He fell asleep at once. Meanwhile, alone in the basement, Mr Rummage was feverishly shoveling sixpences and shillings and half-crowns out of a tea chest and into a Gladstone bag. Ever since he discovered the stash, hidden away under a trapdoor in the ironmongery department, he'd been torn between gloating over his good luck and trembling in case he was found out. And when he'd heard those two plainclothes detectives this morning dropping hints that they were onto him, he'd been itching to get down here and dispose of the loot. If he could get the coins home to his comfortable house in Streatham, he could hide them there safely till the danger had passed. He scooped up the last few sixpences with a scoop-it-up enamel dustpan, shut the Gladstone bag with a snap and placed the trapdoor. Then he hauled a heavy squeeze-it-out mangle over to stand it on top of it, looked around critically to make sure that he hadn't left any sixpences on the floor, and turned off the one hissing gaslight. Nearly done, he thought. Soon to be safe. He picked up the Gladstone bag, tiptoed to the stairs, and then froze. Burglars! There were noises from the floor above, muffled thuds and mutterings of a sort which would have been made by any other honest person. Mr Rummage bit his lip. He wasn't afraid of burglars, but if he had to call a policeman while carrying a Gladstone bag full of snide coins, perhaps he could scare them away without involving the police. Pausing only to take a slice-it-off silver-plated carving knife from a nearby rack of kitchen equipment, he tiptoed up the stairs and into the main part of the shop. Now, where had that noise come from? He had the impression that it was somewhere in the direction of the gentleman's outfitting department. Creeping through the dark, with his sinister black bag in one hand and the knife held high in the other, he made his evil way across the floor. Meanwhile, in the street outside, the New Cut gang were rapidly changing their plans. He's dead, said Zelina. That horse reviver's done for him. He's only an old man. I think he's fallen over and broken his leg, said Thunderbolt. Or his neck, maybe. Stuff, said Angela. He's fast asleep. I can hear him snoring from out here. Never mind all that, said Benny impatiently. We got an emergency here. Oh no, there's Jelly Belly. Just turning around the corner, under the flaring lights of the theatre, PC Jellico was moving majestically into the New Cut. But as the policeman stopped to inspect the pictures of the actresses outside the theatre, Benny had an inspiration. He'd seen Thunderbolt fiddling absently with his lump of lead, and now Benny snatched it out of his hand and hurled it through the plate glass window with an almighty crash. Glittering splinters of glass flew everywhere. Before the others could react, Benny yelled, Mr Jellico! Mr Jellico! Quick! The constable had heard the noise and turned to look. When he saw Benny jumping and beckoning, he fumbled for his whistle. Hurry! Benny yelled. And to the twins, go and drag him. Go on, make him hurry. PC Jellico was breaking into a run. We had to do it slowly by leaning forward and walking faster and faster. All the time he was trying to get his whistle to his mouth. Beep, beep, became a feeble sound. Thunderbolt ran to help. The constable lumbered up and stopped, heaving and puffing. What's going on, eh? Oh, done that, he said, crimson and breathless, pointing at the window. Someone inside, said Benny. We was just going past when there was this crash. Someone's in there murdering people. Look at the mess in the window. There was no denying it that something awful had happened in that window. PC Jellico scratched his head. He said, still breathless. I better summon assistance. He felt for his whistle again and turned towards the main entrance. "Can I whistle for you, Mr. Jellico?" said Thunderbolt. "I reckon I got a bit more puff." "I think you're probably right," said the policeman, and handed him the whistle before knocking loudly at the front door. Thunderbolt filled his lungs and gave such a blast that it nearly shattered another window. And that was the sound that did it for Mr. Rummage. By this time, he crept into the gentleman's outfitting department. Hearing the smash of the window, he'd almost lost his temper. "How dare they! Vandals!" He took a tighter grip on the slice-it-off carving knife. Any burglar he caught would be lucky to escape without a puncher. Then came Thunderbolt's blast on the whistle. Police! He'd have to hide the coins. Quick! Where could he put them? He looked around in a panic and had an inspiration. The duck's back dummy on the counter. The one old Paget had ducked over. One quick slice with the carving knife, he could tip the coins into its belly and have done with them. He scuttled over to the dummy and held a knife high. And of course, it wasn't a dummy at all. Dippy had been snoozing peacefully, stretched out on the counter, but when he heard footsteps, he opened his eyes. And seeing a wild-eyed lunatic about to slice him open with a carving knife, he sat up at once and screamed at the top of his voice. Mr. Rummage was even more startled, if possible. To find a dummy opening its hideous eyes and sitting up and screaming at him was more than his nerves could take. He dropped the knife, leapt 6 feet backwards and 4 feet in the air, and screamed even louder. The Gladstone bag flew out of his hand and landed on the floor where it burst open, scattering a fountain of coins everywhere. And while Mr. Rummage and Dippy were screaming at each other, the door burst open and in came PC Jellico, followed by a mob of howling children. The shop was dark, of course, but Benny struck a match at once and lit the nearest gaslight. "Look," he said, pointing dramatically at the quivering Mr. Rummage. "Guilt's all over him, Mr. Jellico," and holding the detective camera still, he took a photograph. "Huh?" said the policeman. "This is the shop owner." "Look at those snide coins, Mr. Jellico," said Thunderbolt. "Thousands of them. He's been uttering them. See, he's the one that did it." But all Mr. Rummage was uttering now were the words, the dummy, in a hoarse and broken voice. He pointed a quaking finger at the counter. They all turned to look. There, on the polished wood, lying full length, was a plaster dummy, wearing a duck's back mackintosh. PC Jellico strode up and prodded it with a mighty finger. "Well," he said, "what about it?" "It sat up. Its eyes. Its face. Horrible. It screamed at me." Under the other side of the counter, unseen by anyone, Angela clamped her hands over Dippy's mouth, while Zelina whispered in his ear, "Hush, keep quiet, Dippy." Benny said loudly, "It's clear what happened, Mr. Jellico. Mr. Rummage was going to hide all these snide coins, what he's been passing out, and his guilty conscience got too much for him. He had an illumination." "Hallucination," said Thunderbolt. "Yeah, one of them. You can tell he's had a shock. He must have been awful guilty. All them coins he's been passing out all this time." PC Jellico, still breathing heavily, turned over one of the sixpences in his fingers and then bit it. He said. "Was this in your possession, Mr. Rummage?" Yes, I admit it. It's true. I'm guilty. I confess. The dummy? Just don't make me stay with the dummy. Take me away." Mr. PC Jellico pulled out his handcuffs. "I have no alternative but to apply the full rigour of the law," he said. "Roger Rummage, I arrest you for the utterance of forged coins." In the excitement, the twins managed to smuggle Dippy out the shop. A crowd was beginning to gather, and once they realised what Mr. Rummage had been arrested for, they became quite angry. "Rich man like him taking money out of the pockets of the poor? He should be ashamed. Or cut his head off, I reckon. It was good enough for King Charles, it's good enough for him." All right, move aside," said PC Jellico, gathering the shivering pot shop owner. "This man is my lawful prisoner, and I'm going to take him down the nick and charge him according to due process of law. So clear out the way, else I'll fetch you a belt round the ear." No one wanted to risk a belt around the ear from PC Jellico's ham-sized fists, so they made way and a procession followed them, all the way to the police station. At the head of it was Thunderbolt. Mr Jellico, they'll have to release my pa now, won't they? Because if you've got the real criminal, they'll see pa's not guilty. I can't be answerable for the decisions of the magistrate, said PC Jellico loftily. And the gang had to put up with that. When they reached the police station, the crowd was shut out, but Benny and Thunderbolt were admitted as witnesses. The sergeant on duty wrote down all the particulars and looked very hard at Mr Rummage when he explained about the dummy. It sat up. It opened its eyes. It screamed at me. I can see now that it was horrible warning. Sergeant, I should never have given in to the temptation. I'll never do it again. Oh, those eyes. Those hideous eyes. Said the sergeant, writing it all down. After Mr Rummage had been taken away to the cells, and the Gladstone bag and the coins and the slice-it-off silver-plated carving knife had been locked away as evidence, the sergeant looked up to find Thunderbolt still waiting anxiously at the desk. You still here? What do you want? There ain't no reward, you know. I want my pa, Thunderbolt said. That's right, said Benny. You can't hold two prisoners for the same offence. It's against the law. And you know old Rummage done it, because he said so. And I got a photograph to prove it. He brandished the detective camera pugnaciously. So can I have my pa back? Said Thunderbolt. No, said the sergeant. The two boys opened their mouths, then shut them again. Thunderbolt suddenly felt very small. Why? He said after a moment. Because your pa wasn't arrested for coining. He was arrested for another offence altogether, and he's been remanded on bail. Have you got £50 to bail him out? I thought not. So what are you going to do now? Well, that's the end of that chapter, guys. The end of chapter 6. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll move on to chapter 7 next time. See you all soon. Bye.